You know, we ask ourselves questions all the time. But some questions, they seem simple on the surface, but when you really start to think about them, things like, what actually makes an action right? Or, why is it wrong to lie? Well, that's when you stumble into some of philosophy's biggest, most fascinating problems. And that reflection, that's exactly where ethics begins.
So, to see what I mean, let's just jump right into a little thought experiment. Picture this. You're walking along, maybe through a park, and you spot a purse lying on the ground. You pick it up, you look inside, and yup, there's a driver's license, so you know exactly who it belongs to. And then you see a huge stack of cash. We're talking $4,000. I mean, come on, that's not just a few bucks you found. For a lot of us, that's life-changing money. That could pay off a huge chunk of debt, or maybe cover your rent for months. It's significant. And here is the real kicker. Absolutely no one saw you find it. You could just pocket the cash, ditch the purse, and nobody would ever know. So what do you do? But the really deep philosophical question here isn't just what you do, it's why. How do you justify your choice, especially a choice to be honest when being dishonest is totally safe and, $4,000 richer? This right here is what we can call the finder's dilemma. It's that classic battle between a moral impulse, honesty, and a really strong personal temptation.
Now, it's really easy to just fall back on a saying like, oh, honesty is the best policy. But in philosophy, that's what's called begging the question. It's basically a circular argument. You're just saying it's the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do. That doesn't actually give us a reason. So we need something better. We need a good reason to be honest, especially when it's going to cost you $4,000.
And to find that reason, we've got to understand something really important first. The word morality can actually mean two totally different things. So let's break down this crucial distinction between morality that's based on custom and morality that's based on reason. Okay, so check this out. On one hand, you've got what's called conventional morality. This is basically the stuff your society, your culture just happens to believe is right or wrong. It's the unwritten rules, the traditions. But then, on the other hand, you have this idea of a universal moral ideal. And this is totally different. It's based on pure reason, the idea that there are standards of right and wrong that should apply to everyone, everywhere, no matter what their local customs are. And there's a perfect example of this clash in literature. Huckleberry Finn. Think about it. The conventional morality of his time and place said that helping Jim, a runaway slave, was a horrible sin. Everything he'd ever been taught screamed at him to turn Jim in. But his own reason, and more importantly, his friendship and his personal connection with Jim, it told him something completely different. He ended up defying his society's rules because he appealed to a higher, more universal idea of what was right. He knew what his society believed was actually deeply wrong. So what does that tell us? It means if the customs of our society can be flat out wrong, and they obviously can be, then just saying, that's what we do around here, is not a good enough reason for our actions. And that gives ethical theory its big job, to go searching for some kind of rational foundation to help guide what we do. Which, of course, leads us to the big question. If we can't just trust custom and tradition, how in the world do we find a justification for our choices that's actually built on solid reason? Well, lucky for us, philosophers have come up with two major roadmaps to help us think through these kinds of problems. So let's take a look at these two paths. These are really the two dominant ways of thinking in ethical theory, and each one gives you a completely different way to approach a moral problem.
All right, path number one is what we call teleological theory. Now that's a big word, but it just comes from the Greek telos, which means end or goal. So for a teleologist, it's all about the outcome. To figure out if an action is right or wrong, you look at the consequences. The question is always, which choice is going to produce the greatest amount of good in the world?
And path number two, that's deontological theory. This one comes from the Greek word deon, which means duty. And for a deontologist, morality has nothing to do with the consequences. It's all about following rules and fulfilling your duties. Certain things are just inherently right, and other things are just inherently wrong, and you have a duty to do the right thing, period. The outcome doesn't change that. In this slide right here, this is the money shot. It lays it all out side by side. The teleologist is focused on outcomes, asking what's going to create the best result. Think of a doctor. Their goal is to produce health, the best possible outcome. But the deontologist, they're focused on rules. They ask, what is my duty here? Think of a judge. They have to follow the law, the statute, even if they don't love the outcome in a particular case.
Okay, so let's bring it back to that purse full of cash. How would each one handle it? Well, the teleologist would basically pull out a moral calculator. They'd start weighing the pros and cons. How much good would this $4,000 do for me and my family versus how much pain will it cause the owner to lose it? The right answer all depends on which action creates the best overall state of affairs. But the deontologist, they don't need a calculator. They just say, taking things that aren't mine is stealing, and stealing is wrong. I have a duty to return it. End of story. The consequences simply don't matter.
And, this brings it all right back around to you. When you have to make a hard call, what's guiding you? Which of these frameworks are you using to make your choice, maybe without even realizing it?
Because here's the thing. The real point of studying ethics isn't to get a neat little list of rules to follow. It's about getting the tools to think through these tough problems in a clear, structured way. It empowers you to analyze a situation, to really understand your own reasoning, and to ask better, sharper questions about what you ought to do.
So I'll leave you with this to chew on. The next time you face a dilemma, ask yourself, what matters more? Is the right path determined by the destination you're trying to reach, the best possible outcome? Or is it determined by the rules of the road, the duties and principles you have to follow along the way? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.